Hello, hello, and welcome to the reading room. Thank you for finding me here. I've been reading your work all afternoon and I've chosen my favourites. There has been some wonderful description today, really evocative scene setting, and that beach has come to life. I'm going to do a roll call now of the favourites and the ones I've chosen and woven together in today's story for the nation. Listen carefully, listen out for your name. It might be you. Okay, Elliot Glennon, you're 11, you wrote chunk 1, thank you. Ben Masters, you wrote chunk 2 and you're 11. Lauren Fladd, you're 10 and you wrote chunk 3. Thank you, Jacob Buxton, you're 9, writing chunk 4. And Harriet, your writing was sent in to me by Helena Stass on Twitter and you're 9. Thank you, Daisy Callow, you wrote chunk 6 and you're 11 years old. Thank you, Arthur, your work got sent in to me by Kay Pennell on Twitter and you're 7. Writing 7 actually. Elsie Cunningham, you're 8 years old, writing chunk 8, and Lucia, you're 7, writing chunk 9. Now, Mrs. C asked you today to construct a complex sentence that started with an ing verb, and I was on the particular lookout for those, and there were some really good ones, and I noticed actually the people who used a double ing verb in their subordinating clause. I mean, that was really impressive. The other thing we were doing today, we were drenching our scene in the sounds of the sea, all the waves, all the breakers, all those sounds coming through to give it more of a 3D experience, and that was stunning. And then at the end, we used a quick simile device where we compared other things that were gold and we hyphenated them and made them into a unit. Very clever device, and we've had some really interesting, we've had sapphire seas and sapphire blues. Oh, gorgeous. Really impressive stuff today. And actually, some parents and some teachers have been commenting that your writing is getting better every day. And I'd have to agree with that. I'm noticing that the thought that has gone into your work has improved inordinately in these past few weeks. So, without further ado, this is going to be a very descriptive piece. We're writing the words for Piper. Piper sat burrowed into the nest, and the splashing and the crashing of the waves pulsing and echoing everywhere. Chirping joyfully, Mum danced gracefully across the beach, flitting from one spot to another as quick as a blink of an eye. She jabbed her head into the sand and triumphantly pulled out a pristine white shell from the sunrise gold depths. Flicking her meal in the air, she gestured to Piper. He immediately closed his eyes and opened his mouth, awaiting the tender fish. Piper opened one eye, still expecting food. The wind murmured softly in the dunes, causing the grass to sway and flow like the crystal clear ocean. His stomach ached impatiently whilst the carnival of a meal did not come. Piper looked out onto the waves to see Mum collecting food with the others. He stubbornly realised that he'd have to go and get his own lunch. As he looked out, he saw the scene. Showering on the still sea were the wands of butter gold sunlight. The breakers rippled through the sand whilst roaring with sound, and happily the bright rays of light filled the sky, yet at the same time mothers seemed to be flying off over the soft smooth sand. Then, excitedly, embedding her beak sharply into the wet, cold sand, Piper was too afraid to follow her. If anything, he wanted his mum to follow him. Oh, annoyingly, Piper opened his long beak, and to his surprise, his mum still didn't come, until finally Piper figured out he'd have to leave the nest. Splashing sea water droplets speckled onto the stony sand, and when the transparent flood of floral waves crashed against the shore, it left a cluster of creamy foam. Piper observed quietly, in desperate need for food. Unfortunately, he was too scared of the striking waves, but nothing could stop the daring chick to go and find a scrumptious meal. The sun shone onto the golden butter sand, and Piper was sprinting even, to get the food before the water did. But suddenly, the chick twirled back towards the shelter, quite afraid of the waves. How was Piper going to get food? Would he starve? This time, Piper was determined to get his meal. He charged, and boom, and the waves splashed over his head. He saw glorious fresh seaweed swishing and swaying, and pieces of glowing neon coral peacefully resting on the ocean floor, pastel seashells dancing in the currents, and finally the crystal clear ocean itself. Piper never knew the ocean was so beautiful, and the chick splashed his way out of the water, astonished. He could not believe his eyes. Rumbling against his feathered body, Piper's tummy grumbled with hunger. Looking towards the glassy sea, he spotted, out of the corner of his eye, a shard of tasty-looking fish. Without thinking, he rushed with his wobbly walk towards the open-mouthed sea, and with a whoosh, with a sigh, the sea chased the wide-eyed chick away. Oh, crashing down on the sand waves, there was a boom, and it was booming like thunder, and Piper buried himself under the sand whilst the hermit crabs scurried away. The sapphire blue waves imprisoned Piper under the sea, where shells were standing and that, like soldiers, and mussels were laying dead. As sunset yellow sand laid there like dust, the beautiful waves sang like a choir. The waves gripped back to reveal a fluffy ball called Piper. Submerged under the glistening sea, rays of sunshine darted through the dancing waves, and Piper gazed upon the cautious clams as they rose from their hiding places under the safety of the sea. The ocean was alive with a harmony of bubbles gently rippling to the surface before the waves slowly disappeared. And all of a sudden, Piper was back on the beach in awe of the crystal clear sea in front of him. Running madly, Piper stunned the birds. Cheep, tweet, and they all flew away. Splashing and dashing, Piper was speeding wildly through the transparent water. The shiny water smoothly splashed onto Piper. She loved the feeling of cool, refreshing water on her fluffy wet feathers. The calm, swaying wind made Piper content and fulfilled. She darted around her proud mum, and the golden coral sun dazzled onto the briny ocean. She dug herself into the cold, wet sand, and to her surprise, she saw Piper nudging out a delicious-looking crab. Skimming the sea, Piper dashed to and fro, carrying a pristine silvery rock in his miniature beak. He could hear the grumbles from the ocean and could feel the hot canary gold sand beneath his feet. He leapt further into the crystal clear sea, followed by his very proud mother. By now, Piper had learnt how to find food for himself. He expertly caught a delicious clam to enjoy with his mum. He was content. The sea was his best friend. And over time, his rare talent attracted many more birds, and he fed his flock all sorts, and they were very grateful. Once he came across a clam so big that he just had to pull it out with all his might to make it move. Glancing at the pearl white bubble, he scampered towards it, and to his horror, the sea came out tumbling and thrashing towards him. He leapt away and could barely hear his little feet crunching on the sand as he leapt onto the dry brown seaweed. Lurking underneath the sand, something carried him off out of the seaweed and into the daylight. And suddenly, a family of hermit crabs, minding their own business, scuttled towards the broad sea. Piper was covered from beak to tail in frothy, misty water. Pop, pop, pop. The bubbles rose from the depth of the sea to the top of the water. Knowing where all the food was, he rushed to tell his mum the great news. And with that, he jumped back into the sea and caught as many clams as he could. He cannonballed into the fresh-smelling waves and let the coldness rush over him. Well, super sentence stackers, do you know that scene is very fixed? It's Piper, it's the beach, it's the same moment, really intensified. And what I loved about your writing today is that you didn't plot push. You intensified that moment for us with your words, and all of those wonderful hyphenated new quick similes that you drenched your work with were particularly impressive. Okay, everybody, tomorrow we have a funny film. It's a short animation and it's called Presto. It's about a magician who is trying to control a very naughty rabbit. The rabbit's name is Alex. You might call him a smart Alec, actually. He's very naughty indeed. The poor magician is really trying his best to control him. I'm really looking forward to that film tomorrow. There's a lot of humour in it, and we can use lots of magician and themed ideas linked to magic and wizardry. I can't wait to see you in the classroom tomorrow with your pencil, your pen, and your switched on, excited mind as together, my writing apprentices, we build a story for the nation. So I'll see you tomorrow at 9:45 in the Super Sentence Stackers classroom. Thank you very much.